Hello friends, this video on organisms and population part 17 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So with this we have discussed about the organisms and at the ecology at an organism level. So here till now we had been only talking about specific organisms, how they adapt to specific climatic conditions and what are the abiotic components of the environment, that is the non-living components of the environment like soil, water, temperature, etc. Now we are going to talk about populations. Now that we are clear with the idea of ecology at organism level, it is time to talk about ecology at population level. How different populations interact with each other, how populations of species interact with the abiotic components of the environment. So that's what we will see in the next section. So before we start ahead with the population ecology, let's talk about population. So as discussed before also, that it is nothing but group of organisms living in a particular area at a particular time. So population, whenever we talk about it, it has to be a group of organisms, multiple organisms of a particular area at a particular time. So that's how population can be defined. So the first thing that comes to our mind is human population, but you think of other organisms. For example, think of bacteria. So if you have a culture dish where bacteria starts growing, so from one bacteria it starts multiplying in numbers, and that's how it creates an entire population of bacteria. And the area here is that particular culture dish, and the time could be any specific time. So you can mention the total number of organisms at a particular time, and that would define the population of bacteria. Similarly, if you look at a pond, the number of lilies which you see in the pond, that constitute the population of lilies within a particular pond or within a particular water body. So that's how we talk about population. Now, population and individual, these are not the same things, and there are certain aspects which are different in case of an individual and that of a population. So in case of individual, we talk about a single organism. One particular individual is an organism. So we talk about birth and death of an organism. So one organism can die, one organism can take birth. So we talk in terms of births and deaths. But when it comes to population, we talk about birth rate and death rate, because we cannot say that the population is born. A population can never be born, because population is all about multiple organisms. So maybe one or two organisms in that population can be born. So basically, for a population as a whole, we talk about birth rate, how fast individuals are taking birth, how fast individuals are dying. So we talk about the rate of birth and death. Similarly, in case of an individual, we talk about a distinct sex, whether the individual is male or female. But we cannot say that the population is male. So the population can either consist of male or female. It can consist of both. So we talk about sex ratio. That is how much percentage of male exists in a population, how much percentage of female exists in a population. So we talk about sex ratio in a population. In case of individual, we talk about a specific age. An individual can be 5 years old, the organism can be 10 years old, the organism can be 12 years old. But when it comes to population, there is no age of the entire population. That population can have individuals who are 5 years old, it can also have individuals who are 10 years old, it also has individuals who are 60 years old. So in population, what we talk about is age distribution. That is how many people of age less than 5 years exist in a population. How many people of age less than 20 years exist in a population. How many people of more than 60 years exist in a population. So we basically talk about how age distribution has taken place in a population. So these are some of the terms with regards to population. So we will discuss about them in more detail now. So let us start with birth and death rates. So as I said, when you talk about one individual, you talk of this bird. So the bird is born. Similarly, a bird might die. So we can talk about birth and death in case of an individual when we are talking only about this bird. But when it comes to population, the population cannot take birth together and the population cannot die together as well. So in case of population, what we talk about is how many new organisms are born, how many existing organisms have died. So if 3 organisms die out of this population of say 12 or 13 organisms. So the population size decreased. Similarly, if more new organisms are born, then the population size would increase. So birth rate determines the increase in number of organisms in a population, because with birth more organisms are being added to the population, so your population is increasing. Similarly, when we talk about death rate, it determines the decrease in the number of organisms in a population. So let's say this is a population of birds where organisms are dying. So as organisms die, the size of the population keep reducing, the total number of organisms in the population keep reducing. Now in reality, both of these happen. In reality, new organisms are born as well as existing organisms die. So it is like a kind of balance. If the number of organisms who are born is more than the number of organisms dying, then the population size would increase, right? So if number of births is more than number of deaths, then what will happen? The population size would increase. If the number of deaths is more than the number of birth, then the overall population size would decrease. So that's the simple logic behind it. Now the question is, how do we calculate birth rates and death rate? How do we actually calculate that? Because in a lot of cases, it is not possible to calculate the number of organisms. For example, if you think of that bacteria in a culture dish, so bacteria keep growing very fast, they multiply very fast, so it becomes very difficult to count the number of bacteria present in a culture dish. So calculating the population by counting the number of individuals could become a very tedious task. So therefore, whenever we have to define birth rate or we have to calculate birth rate or death rate, we calculate in terms of per capita. So we talk in terms of per capita births or per capita death. Now what is the meaning of per capita? It means for each person or in relation to an individual, in relation to a single person. So let me take this example. For this population of birds which you see on the screen, birth rate would be the number of birds per bird per year. So if you talk about birth rate in case of this population of birds, so this would be equal to number of birds per bird per year. Now, it is not necessary that every bird would have given birth to a new one, but this is how we calculate it to keep the calculation simpler and universal. So, we always define birth rate and death rate as number of births or deaths per bird per year. So, let us look at this example. Let us say here the existing population of bird is 20. Let's say 20 birds are present right now. Now let's say that in the last 1 year, 5 new births had taken place. 5 new birds are born. And also in the last 1 year, 8 existing birds have died. So that means in last 1 year, 5 new birds have been added to the population. So if I ask you, just giving this data, if I ask you what would be the birth rate? So the birth rate would be equal to number of birds, that is 5, divided by the total number of birds which were present earlier, that is 20. So this is equal to 1 by 4. So basically 1 by 4 birds per bird per year. Per bird per year. So per year, because this data is given for 1 year only. Similarly, if I say that in 1 year 8 deaths have occurred. So how do we calculate the death rate? Death rate would be equal to number of death per bird per year. So how many number of deaths? 8 deaths per bird. But here how many total birds were there? 20. So 8 divided by 20, which will be 2 by 5. So basically 2 by 5 death rate per bird per year. So this is how we get an idea about the birth rate or the death rates of organisms in a population. So please remember, this is how we try to calculate birth and death rates. So we can say that birth rate is equal to number of birds by existing population per year. So that's what I explained just now. Now, the next important parameter of a population is the sex ratio. Now, as I mentioned before also that in case of an individual, the individual can either be a male or a female. But when it comes to population, males, females, both would exist. So this is expressed in percentage of males and females. That is how much percentage of the population is male and how much percentage of the population is female. So let us look at the screen. So on the screen, how many males do we have? So if you look at the screen, you see that the total number of males is 13. The total number of females are 6. And the total number of organisms including male and female is 13. So if I ask you how many percentage of the population is male, so what will you say? That would be 7 out of 13 into 100, which comes out to be 53.84%. Similarly, if I ask you what percentage of the population is female, so that would be 6 divided by 13 into 100, which comes out to be 46.15%. So we can say that 46.15% of the population is female and 53.84% of the population is male. So this is how we specify the sex ratio in a population, because when it comes to an individual, we will say this individual is male or this individual is female, but when it comes to population, it has both male and female. So we say this much percentage is male and this much percentage of the population is female. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more educational videos with a better experience. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for latest updates. Thank you once again.